Hello, everybody. We'll just give it a couple of minutes while people are logging on. Thank you for joining us. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Sara Cortez, and I'm the Lifelong Learning Coordinator over at the Garfield Park Conservatory. Welcome to Second Wednesday Lectures with us. Today, we have Marco Thomas. Marco Thomas is an urban farmer from Virginia. Marco is dedicated to natural farming practices and growing his own soil inputs. So he's here today to talk with us about his work and the magic of soil building. Thank you for joining us, Marco.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, like Sarah said, I practice natural farming techniques. I live in Petersburg, Virginia. We have a small piece of property right in the heart of the Old Town district. And it's the entire area was built in about 1800s, and so this property has been somewhat of a vacant lot for many years, and I decided to use natural farming techniques to improve the soil and then move on to growing food on this property. So one of the biggest things with natural farming, when people hear it, some people haven't really heard it in that way or heard the terms natural and farming together. Basically what natural farming is you're doing as nature does to grow your food, to grow your plants. And you're doing that in a way that is, oh, I'm sorry, cut that off.
Sorry, real quick, if anybody has questions as we're going through, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll stop periodically to answer questions.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, good. So natural farming is doing as nature does. You're basically mimicking the processes that go on in nature, and you're bringing those to your garden where you can grow food and do it in a way that's very cost effective as well as natural. As the name says, you're doing no harm. The biggest part, the main piece to natural farming is indigenous microorganisms. And what those are, everywhere in the soil, there are microorganisms, and they have relationships with the plants that are around them. And what they do is they form certain bonds with the plant roots. And that's why you can see a forest and wonder that, wow, how does that forest grow so well and no one ever fertilized it? The way that happens is that soil microbes are breaking down organic material, forming relations with plant roots, fungi, bacteria, yeast, and everything else that's in the soil food web. And those attract larger soil organisms such as earthworms, and basically create an environment where plants are conducive for plants to grow. So one of the main things we do in natural farming is we collect microorganisms. How do you collect those? So one way is you take partially cooked rice and you put it in a wooden box or basket, and you want to find an area near your garden that has a lot of vegetative growth. So you look for, as close, the first collection you take, you always want it to be really close to your garden. So you want to take a collection that's relatively close. If you have to, you can go to a more, if where you live is really urban and you don't have a lot of trees and things like that, you can go to a park or somewhere like that. But the thing you want to do is you want to put your rice in a box and you want to put it in a place under big, strong trees protected from the rain, or if it's going to rain, you want to cover it up. And what you do is you leave that out for a period of 3 to 10 days, just depending on how cool it is or how hot it is. And what the soil microorganisms will do, they'll grow up into that rice. And then when you come back to collect that, you'll have a vast array of colors and fuzzy white, mycelium, and all the kinds of different things that came out of that soil are now in this box of rice. So you can take this box of rice, which is now loaded with the strong local microorganisms that have been growing in your area for a long time, and you can combine that with sugar, equal weight rice to sugar, and that will put all those microbes in a dormant state. And now that mix is called IMO2, and you can put that on your shelf and use that to water into your garden anytime you want. It's shelf stable because the sugar and the water molecules, the sugar extracts all the water molecules out of the microbes and put them in a dormant state. So when you use them again, rehydrate them, they come back to life, and now you can populate your soil with microorganisms that way. And I know that part is probably a little bit foreign to some people, but that's part, and it sounds a little bit more technical than it is, but it's really not. You really just, and I even use leftover rice. You want to be as cost effective as you can. And one of the principles is use what you have. So if you have some leftover white rice, you save it, put it in the freezer. And then the next time you want to collect indigenous microorganisms, you have your rice available. So that's the first step, is you want to get that microbiology into your garden. And from there, my next step, the way I like to do it is I combine, there's a couple different disciplines of natural farming, and a lot of people use them different ways. And two of the ones I like is just traditional Korean natural farming techniques. And then I also like Jadam techniques, which are, Jadam is somewhat of an offshoot. It's an even lower cost method of gardening. So now that we've collected those microbes in step 1, which was the rice collection and the box of rice, we converted that to IMO2. So now we have that watered into our garden. Okay, so now we want to feed those microbes. And what we don't want to do is buy chemical fertilizer or put anything into the garden that you wouldn't really want to consume in your body. And so the way we do that is we use plants that are around us. So if you mow your own lawn, you don't use chemicals, you have a lot of grass clippings. Every week you mow your lawn, you can take those grass clippings, put them in a barrel, fill that barrel partway with water, and that is a Jadam liquid fertilizer. So what happens is you take those plant clippings and water, throw in a handful of your garden soil or leaf mold, and now the microorganisms will break down the grass and the weeds that are in this barrel, or any plant you can use, any leafy plant. Those microbes will break that down into a solution that now can be watered into your garden, which is a very low cost and effective fertilizer. So we can recap at the end, but Jadam is one of the disciplines that I really like. And then Korean natural farming. If you start getting into this and this sparks your interest, if you search those two things, that should point you in the right direction. So if we want, we can stop right there, because I know sometimes the microorganisms part is a little bit tricky, and maybe I started out a little bumpy, so maybe I didn't explain it too well. So if we got any questions up to this point, I'd like to open that up.
Cool, yeah. Somebody asked about the box. You mentioned a cardboard box. Can you clarify that?
So the box can be as simple as a cardboard box. The key is, if you use cardboard, obviously you want to use a non-colored cardboard, and then you want to put a few small holes in it, because the cardboard really doesn't allow air to permeate it to the amount that we want. So put some pencil holes or some pin holes in the box. And cedar is preferred, and that's mainly because cedar lasts a long time. But if you have a wicker basket, I've used wicker baskets before. And I've also taken my rice collection, cleared out the spot on the forest floor, and just set that directly on the forest floor, covered with a plastic sheet or tote. Also collect that way.
Okay, so that makes sense to me. So you're putting the rice in a container, and so it is somewhat exposed then, and so that's kind of what helps build those microorganisms.
Yes, because they're so small, they actually are, in the air, in the air we breathe. So when they're down in that close proximity to the soil, they really can get in there and colonize that rice.
Okay, so then this box is meant to be like reusable, or could it be something that's just like compostable, like a cardboard box? As you mentioned.
Yeah, yes, you can use like I've used in some of my Instagram videos, I've used a pizza box before, just to show that use what you have. If you have a pizza box, that'll work. And then if you want to, obviously, if you want to save that and use it again, you can. But what I did was I just took that and tore it into shreds because it was somewhat inoculated with microbes anyway. And then I just tossed it into a soil pile, and or you put it in a barrel of JLF that we just mentioned.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, essentially we're building a mold, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what, yes. And to most people, when they see it, it's like, oh, that's mold. Yes, that is what you're looking for. But that mold that we're looking for is actually, beneficial fungi and mycelium that form that fungi. And there will be different bacteria, molds. There'll be a little bit of everything in there, but mostly we're looking for that beneficial fungi because, as a lot of people know, and if you don't know, our gardening and the plants we grow prefer a fungally dominant soil. And that doesn't mean they don't have plenty of bacteria. That just means that they're predominantly fungal dominant, which is why you like to use hardwoods and things like that for your mulches instead of pines and that kind of thing.
Okay. And then somebody asked about the rice, so the rice. So is there, you mentioned that it's partially cooked or you even use leftover rice. Is there anything else that you can use?
Yes, a good friend of mine used sorghum, the grain sorghum, and I'm going to grow some this year coming up. That's a good one. I have some friends overseas that have used. You can use like rice flour. That's still rice, but I've seen people use like oatmeal mixes or different grains that were kind of indigenous to where they were from. So it doesn't necessarily have to be white rice. It can be brown rice, it can be black rice, and it can also be some different grains. The key is the grain is just a carrier for the microbes to want. They say, "Oh, food," so they get in there and they start growing in that substrate.
Cool. Let's see if there's any other questions that are.
Container garden.
So Dan Black asks, and this is going over my head, but can you use rice for IMO2?
Okay, so the IMO1 is when you have that box full of rice and you've collected it for the 3 to 5 days or 10 days, whatever it took, and now you have that box of rice. That's IMO1. When I've combined equal weight rice with sugar, now that's IMO2.
Okay.
I hope that kind of explains it.
Yes. I've got one more questions for you for now, and then I'll let you continue.
Okay.
Someone asked if there's a difference between good fungi and bad fungi. Is there such a thing?
Well, there is a thing. Yes, we do know that, and really do as nature does, and there's always balance between good and bad. If you use those kind of ideas, it puts you in the mindset that, okay, there are good things and bad things in the soil. There's only an issue when they're out of balance. So even as something as bad as anthrax is in most handfuls of soil that you pick up, there would be some kind of spore or two of anthrax. You understand what I mean? So what we do is we don't focus on separating good and bad microbes because mostly what we're doing is growing what is there. So when I put that collection of rice there, it's giving me a balance of what is there. And usually we don't have issues with good or bad fungi. We just have like a good balance and everything, you know, works itself out. Now there are solutions that we make, such as OHN, which is an herbal nutrient. That's sort of like a police to the soil. Say if your soil did get a little out of balance, and that's taking it. We won't even get into that in this talk, but that's one additional input when you start getting your lineup of inputs. That is a tool of yours if you do have an imbalance. Okay,
cool. We've got a couple other questions, but I'll let you continue and we'll come back to some of these.
Okay. So, all right. So the IMO 2 step, so IMO 1 was the rice in the box. IMO 2, we combine with sugar to put in a dormant state. And then we also now have made a fertilizer, which is a Jadam liquid fertilizer. We put our grass clippings and leaves in a barrel. So back to IMO, indigenous microorganisms, the next step would be IMO 3. And what IMO 3 is, now you're taking that IMO 2 and you want to multiply you want to magnify how many microbes you would have in your hand. So if I had a handful of IMO 2, I would have a certain number of microbes in my hand. Once we get through the IMO 3 process, then that number of microbes in that same hand would be multiplied thousands of times, okay? And the way we do that is we take our IMO 2 and carbon source, which is usually like wood chips, and we also use some type of grain, and I use like cracked oats, 1/3 wood chips, 1/3 cracked oats. And then I use also a third of something else. I usually have something like another type of grain or something like that. So what you're doing is you're going to take those 3 things, and now we want to water in our natural farming inputs. And it's kind of difficult to do this all in one class because we have our IMO side, but we also have our input side, which are the things that are feeding all the microbes and nourishing them, and then bringing the enzymes and plant hormones to your garden. So that's difficult, but just picture basically IMO 3, we're making a compost, if you will, because all of us are gardeners. Everyone knows what traditional compost is that heats up. So we're taking this IMO, this compost pile, and now we're watering in all of our natural farming inputs. And what that's going to do is all those microbes now are just going to grow, just multiply so fast. And when they're doing that, they're going to heat up, and that pile can get really hot really fast. So your IMO 3 pile has to be tended to, and we don't want the temperature over around 125 degrees when we're composting. That's what it's similar to a compost, so that just everyone can understand where I'm coming from. So then that gets turned and watered for a process of about 14 days or until it cools down. And then now we have a pile of this IMO 3, which is basically, it looks like a gray or white mass of grain and wood chips, which is super loaded with indigenous microorganisms. Now that's closer to the goal we're trying to get to in our soil. The IMO 2 was a good step. You know, if you stop using fertilizers and start IMO 2, and that simple fertilizer I gave you, that's step 1. That's a really big step. But then when you really want to turn it up, you have to start making your inputs, and you have to start making your IMO 3 and 4 piles. And to me, that's the fun part. It seems intimidating, but once you get into it and you make your first IMO, I think most people just kind of tend to want to do more. So that's the IMO 3 in a nutshell. And I'm sure we'll have questions, so we can just do that now if you guys like.
Yeah, thank you. It does feel a little overwhelming, but I'm gonna try.
Well, yeah, just remember step one. Let's start with the rice, and let's do the rice collection, and then combine it with sugar, and that's a big step one.
Somebody did ask, so can we just put the rice, like step one, into your garden, or does it need to? Are those other two steps like really necessary?
They are not really necessary, but in a sense they are. The reason I wouldn't just put the rice into my garden is because I want that process of the microbes growing to just cease with the sugar being added.
Okay.
And it's really because you can't store it. I guess if you really wanted to just take it and water it right in, yes, you can. 100%, not a problem at all. It's worth going that extra step so you have it on your shelf and you can use it all year long in the winter. You can put it in your house plants, and it just lasts you longer that way.
Speaking of winter, a couple of people have asked if this is something that we can do during the winter, or is it a seasonal type thing?
You want to be as diverse as you can with your IMO collections. So you want to have several, and I have many of them, and they're from different parts of my state and in the region around me as well. It's difficult to collect them now. A lot of my friends and I on Instagram, we pretty much had to shut the collections down. A lot of people were pushing on into early December and November. And unless you're in a warmer zone, I'm in 7B. So if you're in 8, sure, you can collect now. I think 7 on down, it's probably a wrap for now. But if you check my Instagram page, I do have a method where I collect IMO in a cooler. And so what you can do is you can go to the forest right now, and there's still good leaf mold, forest floor soil out there, plenty of white mycelium all in it, and you can bring that back to your house, put it in the bottom of, say, a bin or a tote, then now set your rice box on that, and then do the collection process starting from there.
Okay, so that's a good way, I think, to adapt for the winter, at least here in Chicago.
Yes, there's no collection in Chicago, right?
Someone asked if there's a recommended size for the IMO 3 pile.
You don't want it to be more than, well, it's relative to your equipment. Okay, if you have big equipment, then there is no limit. If you're with a shovel and by hand, then I wouldn't have the pile more than probably knee high, because of the amount of heat it builds. It really builds a lot of heat. So if you're not on it, it'll get anaerobic on you. And what that means is your good bacteria degrade really fast. And then that is when you have an imbalance of bad to good, because now you've kind of burnt out all the good bacteria and fungi and yeasts that are in the pile.
Renee asked, how often do you set out your IMO box with the rice?
It depends. I like to do one a season. If I'm going taking a trip or traveling and I'm going to be there for an extended period, then I try to get one when I'm traveling. But spring, summer, winter, fall, winter, you want to try to hit as many, all of those seasons as you can. And really, once you get that diversity on your shelf, you want to use them all at the same time. So you want to get all your collections, but then when you use them all, because all that is diversity. That's giving you a little bit of microbes that are stronger at this period of time. It's giving you microbes that were stronger when it was hot or cold, or ones that are from the mountains or, from more arid places. So you want that diversity.
Diversity is key.
Mm-hmm.
lot of things. We've had a couple questions about doing this for container gardening. Is that something that's possible?
Yes, it really is. That's one thing I like to focus on small spaces and people using what they have. So one thing is you can do cover crops in containers. It's more of a challenge because of the watering aspect of it and keeping things, the smaller the container, the harder it is to do. However, I keep all of my house plants, whether it's big or small, they all get the same treatment. They all get indigenous microorganisms and they never get fertilizer or anything other than what I make. So yes, you can definitely scale it down or scale it up. When I said make that Jadam liquid fertilizer in a barrel, that can also be in a 5-gallon bucket. It doesn't have to be big, it can be any size. Just keep the same ratio, half plant, the rest water, some microbes and leaf mold.
Awesome. Someone asked about mold that forms in your compost or worm bins. Is that kind of the same? Can you use that?
Definitely, that is indigenous. That is it is the same. Where we're different and where that we take the process farther with natural farming is that we're multiplying the amount of microbes we're building in and biology that we build into it. If you were to just lay that mycelium or whatever you found in your worm bin down in your soil, it just wouldn't give you the same quantity of microbes. It would take so much more. And that's where the natural farming techniques build those up really fast.
Okay, that makes sense. So the microorganisms are present, but we got to do those extra steps to help them multiply then.
Correct.
Okay. Someone asked about the IMO 3 pile getting too hot. Does that happen? What do we do?
It does. Sometimes, because it's like a baby. It really is. Like you have to go out there at midnight sometimes when you first start it because it'll overheat on you that quick. I try to be strategic on when I start it because I know it's going to heat up really fast and at about 18 hours, it's going to really start getting warm. So you want to time when you start it based on when you want to check it. So if you start it at a time when you have to check it at midnight, then that's just what you have to do. But if you miss it and say it does go bad, it's not the end of the world. You can spread it back out and then kind of let it dry out, and then you can re-water it, pile it back up, and start over. It's not you don't waste anything. It's just time.
Awesome. And then somebody asked if the Jadam is made in a 5-gallon bucket. Does it need to be aerated? I'm guessing yes.
No.
Totally had it wrong.
No, it doesn't. One thing about Jadam is they are against for the most part, aerating or using molasses to grow microbes. A lot of people make compost teas and aerated AACTs, aerated compost teas. And what Jadam's thought is the bubbles and which are a rich form of oxygen, and then the molasses, which is an artificial food, is actually growing microbes which are weak because weak microbes don't take much to stay alive. So what they would rather see is you don't touch that bucket and then let the microbes, which are the strongest, be the ones that are dominant. Because what happens is when you bubble your teas, you really don't see when microbes are at their peak. You see a lot of people making teas and they bubble all over, the bubbles everywhere. Well, if you take a straw and blow it in a glass of milk, you can also bubble it everywhere. So it's not necessarily an indication of the amount of microbes. When you make a Jadam bucket, you don't touch it. So you can see the bubbles from the microbes on the surface, they're there. So that's kind of the thing why I don't bubble. You can, and it's all preference. You are the master of your garden. However, those are some reasons why I do not.
And then one more question, I'll let you continue. Someone asked, how do we get the IMO2 into the garden? So specifically, are we adding water? Are we filtering it?
Great question. I didn't cover that. A lot of our inputs are used at low dilutions, and IMO2 is mixed at roughly 1 teaspoon of this rice sugar mix per gallon of water. And you want to use unchlorinated water or tap water that has been left out to gas, because you don't want to, diminish your microbes. So you can mix that at that ratio, 1 teaspoon per gallon. And then if you're running a sprayer, you can strain that rice out, or if you're just running a watering can, you can pour it right on in it. You don't have to strain it either way.
Awesome, thank you. I'm taking notes, everybody, so pardon. All right, I'll go ahead and let you continue, and then we can come back to some more questions.
Okay. So the next step of IMO is IMO4. And what that IMO4 is basically now you're mixing a fertilizer component to it, or, higher nitrogen. And basically it's taking the IMO3 and equal parts, I'm sorry, I misspoke. IMO4 is IMO3 and equal parts garden soil, watered again with your natural farming inputs. I got ahead of myself and started talking about IMO5, which we are not going to talk about. So after you made your IMO3 pile and it has cooled down, now we want to say, okay, now we want even more of this goodness. So we've got a pretty good sized pile, but now to get a bigger pile and to grow the microbes to another level, we want to take equal parts of that IMO3 and your garden soil that you have right there at your garden. Blend those when they're dry, and then water those natural farming inputs, including the IMO2, again, back into it, heat it up again. It'll heat up again, just like a compost, but this time it won't be as finicky. It won't be as sudden. It'll be more of a gradual heat, and the turning will be much less than an IMO3. And usually that IMO4, that's an excellent place to stop. If you made it to IMO4, then you're doing very well. There is IMO5 after that, which is, turns it more into a fertilizer component. But that's kind of an overview of the, indigenous microorganisms part of it. And then the other portion I wanted to kind of talk about was the inputs themselves and how we make those and our mindset behind what ingredients we use. So if anybody's got more, anything else on IMO, let's hear that.
Sure, we do. Somebody asked about the ratios for IMO2.
The ratio is a roughly 1 teaspoon per gallon, or 1 to 1,000 is the technical ratio. And so it'd be 1 milliliter per liter, keeping it really simple.
Cool. And then it sounds like some people want to try this. Susan's a little worried that she's going to have lots of questions. And if you have any resources that you could direct people to that could help. Well,
I answer every question on my Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, you can follow me at Marco_is_growing. And I don't mind answering questions. And then there's also some good references online. There's lots of info, but you have to look for it. Just definitely search some of your YouTube vids, and a lot of those terms that I'm like IMO and things like that. Look on YouTube. My YouTube is minimum, so I don't have much on there. However, there's some excellent folks out there. So once again, give me a shout, email, or on Instagram, or follow some folks on YouTube and things like that.
Yeah, I follow Marco on Instagram, and you do answer all the questions. You post a lot of videos. And so, yeah, his Instagram is a really great resource if you have questions. And you have like a series of saved videos on there that kind of explain what you're going through now. So yes. That would be a really great place if people want to follow up.
There's one on my story that says, it actually says start here, and you just gotta scroll on my stories, and when you see that, it's some nice videos that'll get you right in here. Kind of the same thing we're talking about now.
We've got another question from Susan. She says that her landlord recently brought in some new soil to create a garden, and would that be good soil to start her rice box in, or would you recommend finding another spot?
Yeah, I would recommend, because now that soil is already there, then now you need more diversity. You already have those guys that are in that soil. So now I would recommend go close as you can to the thickest forest you can, and collect there, and now bring that diversity back to your garden, and now you'll start building it all up together.
See if we've got any more. So David asked, with the different IMO levels and the compounding of microbes, have you found a point of diminishing returns?
That's a great question. I have not, and I do scope all of my inputs and things that I make. I have not. You know what I have found? I got a really cool something we found on Instagram about JLF, the bucket Jadam liquid fertilizers we were just talking about. We found that the microbe populations were actually highest at first, and then they diminished towards the middle. But then at the end, one type of microbe dominated and pretty much ate everything. So what that told me was the microbes were high when the vegetation was breaking down. And then once all that vegetation was consumed, because this was a really old bucket, then they ran out of food, and the only ones left were this one larger, and I hadn't even identified it, but there was only a majority of those. So with JLF, they will diminish if you do not refresh your vegetation.
And somebody asked about adding the IMO to a rain barrel. Can you do that?
Okay, no, you can, yes, but you don't want to leave it. If you use your rain barrel for watering, and say it's 50 gallons and you're gonna water out 50 gallons, then yes, you can add your inputs in that, and I do that too. I have three 50-gallon barrels that I can valve off between them. So sometimes when I don't want to spray, I'll just put my natural farming maintenance solution in that last barrel, and then just water it in like that. But you don't want to, definitely not store it in there. Because now your rain barrel will turn into a JLF, and it might get funky on you.
And somebody asked if prairie soil would be okay for starting the IMO.
Excellent. That sounds like a friend of mine on Instagram saying that. Prairie is really one of your best collection spots, and people don't realize that, but prairies are awesome. Yes, definitely. And send me some. I'd like to trade some IMO.
And then Joanna asked, is part of this process intended to cultivate microbes that like anaerobic conditions, or more to cultivate aerobic microbes and that are strong enough to survive harsher conditions?
Well, what it is you're cultivating what is there. It's a mix of the two. So and then there's some that are in between as well. So it's kind of everything that's growing in that soil, because part of it is one place people get hung up is, if you read up on it, science has only identified a low percentage of microorganisms in the soil. Like only 10% of every microbe in the soil has even been identified. So we don't want to get hung up on those kind of things. We want to focus more on growing what is there, and then feeding that and providing that with nutrients to sustain it and make it flourish, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think here in Chicago, one of the things we worry about, and one of our attendees did mention this, is that Chicago is kind of famous for lead being in our soil here.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a lot of lead issues, and did somebody asked if you did testing on your farm, and could you talk a little bit about how that might impact growing these soil inputs?
So I did send my soil out for testing because I wanted to just make sure, and I did know the history of my property. It was a market back in the 1890s when it was made. Yes, I did do testing just for my peace of mind. However, the way I'm doing it now is the city was clearing all the power lines of trees recently, and I had this new space. So somehow I connected with the company that was doing all the trimming, and I got probably 400 yards of wood chips. So what I did was my first layer on my new space was wood chips, all 4 inches to 6 inches thick. And then I also got a couple 100 yards of shredded leaves that I got composting right now. But what I'm doing is I'm building all of my beds on top of the soil. So now the soil is there. I put 4 to 6 inches of wood chips, and now my beds are all going on top of that. And now that soil is coming, the soil that I have made. So that's how, I can, not worry about that. Now, as far as blood, to be honest, microbes are just going to eat that blood right up. That's not an issue, within days probably. So I wouldn't worry about blood. I mean, if you guys think about it, they sell blood meal. That's a big component of, I don't use it, but if you saw blood, scrape it up. If not, I wouldn't.
Marco, I meant lead, not blood.
Oh.
Lead. I'm like blood. I'm just like
lead. I'm like blood because you said Chicago now.
I know. We've got bad rep over here, but
all right,
but it's not that bad.
Okay, so lead. Lead. Okay. Well, that wouldn't be good. However, you could take the approach that I took with building up and then going on top of the soil. And if it's really bad, you could do raised beds to get it up out of that, over top of it, and then build your own soil to use.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the wood chips and like the mulch. Yeah, it seems to be the way that people are going here too. I've seen a lot of people start up gardens, and that's like their base layer.
Yes, it's usually, and what it is it's just a nice, it's carbon. It's just storing carbon, and people say, well, wood chips rob the soil of nitrogen. And to an extent that is true. However, the studies I've read say that only occurs where they are in direct contact. So it just be it happens where they're in direct contact, and the inputs we add overcome that any deficiency that there would be from chips. So I started my first phase of my garden last year with chips, and they're just breaking down really nice, and lots of fungi everywhere. So yeah, I'm a big fan of chips, and especially when they're free.
Yeah, that's really great. So I didn't ask, when did you start doing this work?
Go ahead.
No, and I was just gonna say, like, what's the impact that you've seen of using these inputs?
Well, the impact has been great because I've been not using fertilizer for at least 10 years, like as far as not using anything like, chemical. So I was already on that trajectory of trying to be, quote unquote, as they say, organic. However, I discovered the natural farming along the way. It just made sense. So it's been maybe 4 years that I really dug into natural farming. And it's just been great. The impact is it's cheaper, it's very cost effective, and the plants grow even better. and your impact is positive. What we make and what we put on the soil is actually beneficial. If I poured it in a pond or lake, it would be beneficial. It'd be a food. It wouldn't be anything that was negative. And that's one thing I like to say, you know, most of our things we can eat, you know, that's the crazy thing people don't realize. Like, if you're going to eat and grow plants for food, why would you not use a fertilizer that you could eat as well? You know, think of how clean that is. And that goes for any plant that you grow or food. This method is very clean and very nature, you know, friendly.
Right. That's how I feel, like the microbes can't hurt.
Right. You know, they use microbes to clean up oil spills too. So microbes are very, very powerful.
Right. And I think that there's some research going on too on microbes also cleaning soil, you know, of heavy metals and things like that. I don't know where the research is on that, but I'm wondering if yeah, you know, if you do have soil that, you know, is contaminated, if adding these microbes, you know, in the long run is something that could be beneficial to cleaning that out.
Yeah, it's the best thing you could do. There's nothing better you could do than add them. You know.
Awesome. I think that's it on questions. We did get a few. I apologize if I didn't get to every single one. Yeah, so if there's anything else you'd like to share with us, Marco.
I think that just scratched the surface. There's a lot to it, and I really want to follow me. I want to follow somebody that's doing it right. There's a lot of folks out there. If you follow me, I'll point you in the right direction. I know a lot of good people, and I just want to spread this information. You know, if you can do anything, just stop using the chemicals, save that money, and do this. This is taking gardening to the next level. This is almost like if you like cooking and whipping up things and making good things, then this natural farming is for you. So that's it.
Yeah, that's really great. I appreciate it. It does sound like, yeah, it's super low cost, which I like. I have a small space and it's been hard for me to kind of get a compost going or, you know, like do a lot of soil building. So I'm definitely going to try it for this growing season. And we had spoken earlier about some of the farming work that's going on here in Chicago. We have a really big movement here with gardeners and farmers, and they've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting with a lot of food distribution here in Chicago. And so I'm hoping that this is something that might be beneficial to them. So if you all are watching, I hope this is helpful. What else? We might have some more questions. Someone asked, do you rotate plants every year, or is adding IMO enough to plant the same things year after year? So can this replace crop rotation?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. This is nature doesn't rotate crops. Think about that. When you think about do as nature does, the same tree will grow there forever. Then it'll drop us acorn, and when it dies, another exact tree will grow there again. So nature does not need need rotation. Who needs rotation are the big agriculture guys, where their plants are stripping every nutrient out of the earth, and they don't replenish those by using plant residues and old plants. What we do is we focus on chop and dropped. We cut our plants at soil level, chop those plants up and spread them back out as a mulch to feed the next generation of plants. And I don't do it just on purpose. I have a bed where I like growing peppers, and I just grow peppers in there every year. Sometimes I rotate, but it's not as for a necessity, because I'm putting inputs back into my soil, and they don't need to rotate for that reason.
Okay, yeah, and that was a question from Marcin, who's our beekeeper over at the conservatory. The reason he asked is he says that he knows that there's concerns with pests and disease when you're not rotating crops.
Yeah, and we proved today that is what we call a myth. And that was put out there by when they discovered, hey, look at these chemical fertilizers. And they made us forget that how we used to farm before they made this stuff. Think about that as a people. We forgot that before there was Lowe's, we forgot that people had everything right on their land. There was no store to go to buy this stuff. So part of making us forget was that you better rotate those crops. You better buy more seed to do something different. You can't keep using your own seed. We want you to buy more. So those are the mindsets that natural farming is going where before that. So that's why it's not necessary.
Awesome. Love that. Any more questions? Some people are asking about the recording and transcript of this. We do record the sessions and we post them onto our YouTube. It does take us some time to do the YouTube captioning. So it might not be up right away. If you'd like access to the recording and don't need captions, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. And then I will get that up on I'll get this recording up on our YouTube as soon as possible. Luis asks, do you sell your final product?
I do have a website, microbesbymarco.com, and I sell some things. I make everything small batch, and I do sell surplus, and that helps offset what we're doing over there at Grove Gardens. So you could definitely check me out. And sometimes we don't have anything, and sometimes we have a few things.
Cool. I listed that in the chat. And then Jonathan asks, he's curious about the use in indoor scenarios and trays and hydroponics. Speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, hydro's tough. I don't know if anyone, and I know there are people that are doing it, but I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that's incorporating the natural farming with IMO with hydro. Definitely indoors, 100%. I'm just not familiar with people that are doing it that way.
Cool. Let me see if we've got some more questions. Lots of thank yous for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm definitely going to reach out if I have questions.
Glad people are here. This is wonderful. I love telling people about this. Is really great because it was eye-opening for me. So I know at least somebody's going to get it, and it's going to be great.
Luis also asked if you've ever experimented and done like a side-by-side comparison of growing with the inputs and then without, and what that looks like.
I have grown the same plants both ways, and what it looks like is your natural farming, everything tastes better, everything smells better, and for the most part, everything looks better. It's not always, you don't always get the yield that you would with some of that other stuff. However, when you're focused on quality and knowing what's in your food, then I don't care about a little bit of yield loss. I'll plan a little bit more if I'm hungrier, So that's kind of where it is, and it's not huge, but it's worth it to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, especially just like big monocropping, quality just goes out the window. It's the first thing that goes out the window so that production can be increased. So
right. Yeah.
Someone also asked if spent grains from breweries can be used instead of rice.
I don't know. Try it. Try that out. I know the spent beer grains are great for making bokashi, which we didn't get into that either. They're excellent for that, and y'all know that if you're talking about them. Try it with the IMO. I'm not sure. I would want to sterilize them first, like, just give them a hard steam or boil. just because I don't know what was part of the microbes in their process, and that's not really what we're going for.
That's a good point. Let's see. We've got. I think that might be it. Looks like somebody's got a raised hand, but I'm not exactly sure how to use that feature. If you want to put your question in the Q&A.
Is this, oh, yes.
Lots of thank yous. Thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you all for having me. It's great.
Yeah, I hope that you'll join us again. Real quick, we've got some awesome things going on at the conservatory coming up towards the end of the month. Let's see if I can bring this up. Our greenhouse coordinator, Amelia, who I think is with us today, is going to be hosting a class on, let me see if I can find it. Okay, she's doing a DIY sustainable seed starting and potting mixes class on January 23rd. So yeah, growing season is right around the corner. So if you're interested in that, that'll be January 23rd, and you can find that on our website. And then next month, our guest speaker is going to be Gina Roxas from Trickster Gallery in Schaumburg. Trickster is a Native American art and cultural center, and Gina's going to be sharing some of the work she does there with their native medicine garden and doing some storytelling. So I hope you all can join us for that. Let me see other announcements. Do you have any announcements, Marco? Anything you want to share with us coming up?
No, I don't. Well, I do. I'm going to do a giveaway here soon. So stay tuned. I'm going to do some more giveaways coming up. I have some nice products, age stuff I want to share with folks. And anybody that's going to follow me and you were a part of this, mention that. You know, I'll follow you back. So yeah, appreciate everybody that came out.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And then I did list Marco's Instagram and his website. So yeah, check that out. Keep in touch, and I'll be in touch too, Marco. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
See you, everybody.
Bye.